Everyone thought my life was perfect. Sometimes I believed it too. From the outside, I looked like someone who had figured things out early. A steady job, a warm home, people who laughed loudly around my table. I wore calm like a second skin. I smiled easily. I spoke carefully. I knew how to make life look balanced. Inside, I called it stability. Inside, I told myself stability meant safety. My mornings were predictable in the best way. Coffee steaming near the window, sunlight cutting clean lines across the floor. My phone buzzing with messages that sounded supportive enough. Proud of you, you're doing amazing. Don't change. I held on to those words like proof that I belonged where I stood. At work, people admired my consistency. At home, they admired my patience. In my relationships, they admired my giving nature. I had learned early that being easy to love meant being easy to lean on, so I carried more than my share. I listened longer, I forgave faster. I told myself that being strong meant never making others uncomfortable with my pain. I thought love was proven by endurance. There were people who depended on me emotionally, financially, quietly. I never said no. Saying no felt selfish. Saying no felt like risking the image I had built, the reliable one, the understanding. The one who never caused trouble. I confused peace with silence. Family gatherings felt warm, but scripted. Compliments were delivered like rehearsed lines. You're the strong one. You always handle things so well. We don't worry about you. Each sentence landed softly, but left a strange weight behind. I didn't realize then that being unworried about is not the same as being cared for. My closest relationships felt secure, almost too smooth. Arguments. No raised voices, no dramatic exits. I was proud of that. I believed maturity looked like emotional control. I believed love should be quiet, cooperative, low maintenance. I didn't notice how rarely anyone asked how I was doing, really doing. When I did feel tired, I hid it well. When something hurt, I reframed it. When I felt dismissed, I convinced myself I was being sensitive. That word followed me everywhere. Sensitive, emotional, deep, I wore it like an apology. At night, when the world finally softened, I sometimes felt an unnamed pressure in my chest. Not pain, not fear. Just a sense that something was slightly misaligned. Like a picture frame hanging just a bit crooked. I would straighten it mentally. And move on, I told myself. This is adulthood. This is what stability feels like. There were moments when conversations paused as I entered rooms. Laughter that resumed half a second too late. Glances exchanged quickly, then masked with smiles. I noticed them, but I didn't investigate. I trusted the version of reality that felt safer. Trust was my default. I believed loyalty was mutual. Simply because I practiced it so consistently. I believed people valued me the way I valued them. I believed that being present, generous, and patient created invisible protection around you. No one had ever warned me that consistency makes some people comfortable and others threatened. The day everything shifted didn't announce itself loudly. It didn't come with drama or confrontation. It arrived quietly, like most truths do. It was an ordinary evening. Too ordinary to be dangerous. The house smelled familiar. Voices floated. From another room, low and intimate. I wasn't meant to hear them. That's how I know they were honest. I slowed my steps without meaning to. My name surfaced in the conversation. Not spoken with cruelty. Not spoken with love. Spoken like a topic. He doesn't see it, one voice said. Another replied, that's because they never do. I stood still, heart suddenly loud in my ears. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. Heat in. My face, cold in my hands. That pressure in my chest tightened, finally demanding attention. I waited for laughter, for clarification. For someone to say my name with warmth. It didn't come. Instead, there was a pause. Then a sentence that didn't fit the life I thought I was living. Something about me being easy. Something about me being predictable. Something about me holding things together so others didn't have to. They weren't angry. They weren't whispering secrets. They were discussing me like an arrangement that worked. In that moment, the image I had protected so carefully cracked, not loudly, not fully, just enough to let doubt seep in. I stepped back before anyone noticed me. My footsteps felt unfamiliar, like I was walking out of a version of myself I know. Longer fully recognized, I smiled when I was seen again. I played my role flawlessly, but something had shifted. That night, lying awake, I realized the truth I had avoided for years. A life everyone envies can still be a life where you are quietly underestimated. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. There was no celebration, no dramatic moment where everything suddenly made sense. Just a calm morning where I realized I wasn't bracing myself anymore. My shoulders felt lighter, like I had finally put something down I'd been carrying for years without noticing. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for a message. I wasn't replaying conversations in my head. I wasn't wondering what I could have done differently. That scared me more than pain ever had, because pain was familiar. It gave me a role to play: victim, survivor, the one who endured. But peace asked a harder question: who was I without the struggle? I started changing small things. I woke up earlier, took longer walks, let silence fill rooms I used to drown with noise. I stopped explaining my choices to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. At work, I spoke differently, clearer, firmer. When someone interrupted me, I didn't apologize before continuing. When credit was due, I didn't step back. To make others comfortable, a colleague noticed. "You've changed," she said one afternoon. I smiled. I finally noticed myself. That night, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not to criticize, not to fix, just to look. There were traces of the old me still there, the softness, the empathy, but now they were guarded by something stronger. Boundaries I used to think boundaries were walls, cold, defensive, but I learned they're actually doors. They decide who gets access and who doesn't. And for the first time, I held the key. Someone from my past tried to re-enter my life then, a casual message, a harmless memory, a familiar hook. Old me would have responded out of politeness alone. I didn't, not out of anger. Out of self-respect. I realized I no longer needed closure from people who benefited from my confusion. I didn't need apologies that arrived years too late. I didn't need to be understood by those who never tried. I needed to be aligned with myself. One evening, I sat alone on my balcony as the city settled into night. Cars passed, windows lit up. Everyone moving somewhere, chasing something. I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who loved too openly, trusted too deeply, waited too patiently. I didn't judge her. She did the best she could with what she knew, but I wasn't her anymore. I was someone who knew that love without respect is just sacrifice in disguise. Someone who understood that loyalty to others means nothing if you keep betraying yourself. Someone who finally accepted that being chosen starts with choosing yourself. The fear didn't vanish completely. It never does, but it changed shape. It stopped whispering, "What if you're alone?" and started asking, "What if you're finally free?" That question excited me. I began planning things just for me, not milestones. Not announcements, just quiet promises. To rest when I was tired, to walk away when something felt wrong. To stop shrinking to fit into spaces that refused to grow. I didn't know what the future looked like yet. Love, family, success, those answers were still forming. But for the first time, I trusted myself to meet whatever came next without losing who I was. I wasn't healed. I was healing. And that mattered more. As I turned off the lights that night, my phone buzzed on the table beside me. A new notification. A new name. One I didn't recognize, but somehow it felt important. I stared at the screen. Heart steady this time. Not everything that arrives is meant to break you. Some things arrive to remind you that your story isn't over yet. The message sat on my screen like a weight, pulling memories I thought I had buried back to the surface. Some names don't just belong to people. They belong to versions of you that no longer exist. I waited until the house was quiet, until the night felt honest enough to hold the truth. Then I typed one word. When? We met 2 days later in a small cafe that smelled like burnt coffee and second chances. I arrived early, choosing the seat with my back to the wall, old habit. I watched. The door without meaning to. When they walked in, time didn't rewind the way movies promise. There was no rush. No dramatic pause. Just recognition and something heavier behind it. "You look different," they said. I almost smiled. "So do you." They sat across from me, hands wrapped tightly around a cup they hadn't ordered yet. Nervous. That was new. This used to be the person who always spoke first, decided first, left first. "I owe you honesty," they said quietly. Those words used to thrill me. Once I would have leaned forward, ready to forgive anything just to feel chosen again. But now I stayed still. Listening without reaching, they told me about the past. About things I was never meant to know back then. Conversations that happened behind my back. Decisions made for me, not with me. How my kindness had been mistaken for permission. "I didn't think you'd ever find out," they admitted. That stung more than the truth itself. I realized something in that moment. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's careful, polite. Disguised as protection, I asked the question. I'd never had the courage to ask before. "Did you ever consider how this would affect me?" They hesitated, looked down. "I thought you'd be okay." I nodded slowly. That's what everyone thought. The silence between us grew thick. Not awkward dash revealing dot they apologized. Not dramatically, not perfectly. Just enough to clear their conscience, not enough to heal mine. I accepted it, not because it fixed anything, but because I was tired of carrying resentment that no longer fit who I was becoming. "I'm not here to reopen anything," I said. "I just needed to understand." They looked relieved. Maybe even grateful. I felt neither. What I felt was clarity. On my way home, the city lights blurred through the window. I replayed the conversation, not with pain, but with distance. The story that once defined me had finally loosened its grip. That night I wrote everything down. Not to relive it, but to release it. I named every moment I had ignored my intuition. Every time I had stayed quiet to keep peace. Every version of myself that had settled for partial truths, and then I forgave myself. That was the part no one talks about. Forgiveness isn't always about others. Sometimes it's about letting go of who you were forced to be in order to survive. The next morning I woke up lighter. Not happy, not healed. Just honest. I didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore. Not to them, not to anyone. The truth had done its job. It had freed me from the need to keep proving my worth. I understood now that growth doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up quietly in the choices you make when no one is watching. I wasn't rebuilding my life. I was reclaiming it. And for the first time, that felt like enough. When you stop overgiving, people don't ask what hurt you. They ask what's wrong with you. I felt it in the way conversations changed. Pauses stretched longer. Smiles didn't reach eyes anymore. The warmth I once took for granted cooled into something cautious, almost suspicious. As if my silence had rewritten the rules without asking permission. Someone finally said it out loud. "You've changed." They didn't say it kindly. They said it like an accusation. I nodded slowly. "I know." That response unsettled them more than any argument ever could have. I was supposed to deny it, apologize, reassure them that I was still the same dependable, forgiving version they were comfortable with, but I wasn't. What they really meant was, "You no longer make this easy for us." I started noticing patterns I had ignored before. How often my needs were delayed. How quickly my boundaries were questioned. How my growth made others uneasy, not because it harmed them, but because it exposed something in them they didn't want to face. One evening, I overheard my name mentioned in a low voice. Not cruel, just disappointed. "She's distant lately." She used to be more understanding. Understanding. That word had always been used like a leash. I wanted to scream that understanding had cost me sleep, confidence, and years of self-doubt. That being easy to deal with had meant being easy to overlook, but I stayed quiet. Not because I was afraid, but because I no longer needed to convince anyone. At home, alone, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I searched my face for guilt, for regret, for the softness people accused me of losing. What I saw instead was someone exhausted from carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be hers. The hardest part wasn't losing their approval. It was accepting how conditional it had always been. I remembered the moments I had been celebrated only when I agreed, only when I sacrificed, only when I stayed small enough not to disrupt anyone else's comfort. The praise was real, but it came with invisible strings, and now that I had stepped out of reach, the praise disappeared. A message arrived that night, long, carefully worded. Concern disguised as care. You don't seem like yourself lately. I hope you're not letting things get into your head. I read it twice. This time I replied honestly, I'm finally listening to myself. The typing bubble appeared, stopped, appeared again. Then nothing. That silence felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had over the next few days. Tension replaced familiarity, invitations slowed, conversations became formal. I was no longer included automatically. I had to be asked, and even then it felt optional. Like my presence was being tested. I understood then, boundaries don't just protect you. They reveal who benefited from you not having any. I wasn't angry. I was alert. Every interaction felt like a quiet negotiation now. How much of myself was I willing to give? How much would I withhold? I stopped volunteering information, stopped filling emotional gaps, stopped chasing reassurance. And people noticed. One person finally confronted me directly. Why are you acting like this? I met their gaze. I'm not acting. I'm choosing. They laughed nervously. That's not how relationships work. I thought about all the ways I had worked to keep relationships alive while slowly disappearing inside them. Then maybe, I said softly, they should. That was the moment I felt the line fully harden. The version of me they relied on was gone, and there was no smooth transition to replace her. Later that night, as I lay in bed, my phone buzzed again. This time, the name on the screen made my chest tighten. Someone I hadn't heard from in a long time. Someone tied to a past I thought I had outgrown. The message was short. We need to talk. I've been meaning to tell you something. I stared at the screen, just knowing that whatever came next would force me to confront more than just change. It would force a reckoning.